Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Weekend at Bakugo's. This will be Part 7, Chapter 7. His stomach dropped, sickeningly, as Izuku's head hit the concrete with a dull thud. Still, eyes closed. You'll have to give it your all. What a stupid fucking thing to say to him. This is your fault. Izuku, buddy. His voice cracked as he reached for Izuku. It's always your fault he's hurt. Bakugo shook his head. Not anymore, he told himself and squeezed Izuku's fingers. Never again, I fucking swear. He heard Aizawa and Kirishima coming up behind him, but didn't take his eyes off Izuku. His heart raced as the seconds dragged. Kacchan? Izuku's eyes opened, and he blinked owlishly. I'm here, Izuku. Right here. Bakugo was unable to keep the breathless relief out of his voice. Stay still, though, okay? You hit your head when you fell over. Okay. The rope hurt my hands, Kacchan. Izuku held his palms up so Bakugo could see the friction burns. Is that why you fell? Uh-huh. Does anything else hurt, Midoriya? Aizawa asked from behind Bakugo. No, Mr. Zawa, just my hands. Izuku presented his palms to Aizawa to inspect as well. Aizawa nodded and produced a penlight from his pocket as he knelt down next to Izuku. Kirishima squatted down behind him, careful not to crowd the situation, but near enough to be of assistance if needed. I'm going to do a quick check to make sure everything's okay. Will you stay still for me? Izuku nodded ever so slightly, and reached for Bakugo's hand. I've got you, he croaked. As Aizawa performed some basic checks for concussion and other injuries, the relief that Bakugo had begun to feel was chased away. The sight of Izuku on his back, eyes closed and still, had lodged itself behind his eyes. With every blink, Izuku shifted and aged, injuries blossomed, bled, and gaped. Ragged breathing becoming labored and shallower and shallower and shallower. Bakugo. His eyes snapped to Aizawa's face and realized it was his own breathing he could hear. Kirishima stood behind their teacher, head cocked to one side, eyes narrowed in concern. I'm fine, Bakugo mumbled. How's Izuku? In for 4, out for 8. Get a grip on yourself. I was just saying that he's fine. No signs of concussion, no other injuries at all, not even a bump from the fall. Aizawa repocketed his penlight. You can sit up now, Midoriya. Slowly, though. Bakugo put his hand on Izuku's back as he sat up. What about his hands? In for 4, out for 8. There's a medikit in the training crate. It'll have some cream in it, Kirishima piped up. Come with me, Midoriya, and we'll sort that out. Aizawa placed his hand on Izuku's head to steer him. No more activities for you today, though. I think we made it clear enough that you have a strength quirk, don't you think? You did well. Izuku nodded, smiling proudly. Aizawa added to Bakugo and Kirishima. If you want to use this time for some sparring training, go ahead. I'm sure Midoriya would like to see you both in action. Just try to keep damage and further injuries to a minimum. They both nodded as their teacher and Izuku retreated to the crate. You okay, man? You seemed a bit out of it there for a second. Kirishima peered at Bakugo. He scowled at the proximity, the scrutiny. The images flickering behind his eyes were not letting up. The nasty little blaming voice in his head was providing a vitriolic soundtrack. Fuck. In for 4, out for 8, he thought, and with a growl, opted for fists over words. They were both panting when Kirishima had grabbed the wrist of the hand Bakugo had aimed at him and forced the palm down at the ground. Bakugo grinned and fired anyway, creating an upshot of dust and smoke between them. Hopping backwards, he pulled Kirishima into the thick of the cloud and fired again with his free hand to propel him up and over Kirishima's head. His opponent hadn't been prepared to deal with both the smoke and his sudden change in direction, and so his wrist came free. Bakugo only had a split second before Kirishima began to turn. They sparred often, so it was hard for one to surprise the other. He dropped into a crouch as soon as he landed to make the most of the remaining smoke cover. Kirishima turned around to his right, and Bakugo made sure to stay behind his friend's right shoulder until they had done a complete 180. Staying low, he rushed forward and swiped at the back of Kirishima's left knee, just enough to take the support out of it, but not enough to do any damage. Kirishima buckled to one side with his arms thrown out wide. Bakugo caught both wrists, crossed them behind Kirishima's back, and leaned his full weight into his friend's own unsteadiness to force Kirishima to the ground, pinned. I was close this time, Kirishima said into the concrete, not an ounce of bitterness in his voice. Yeah, sure you were. grumbled Bakugo, wiping his forehead on his sleeve. He settled back in a squat so Kirishima could move. Hey, if you hadn't blinded me. But I did. I'll expect it next time. Kirishima stood and grinned down at him. Good, that. Kacchan! Bakugo looked around as Izuku collided with him, knocking him out of the squat and onto his back. Izuku had jumped to latch his arms around Bakugo's neck and was yelling. That was amazing, Kacchan! And Kiri's so cool! And I thought that Kiri had you and then you made the smoke and did the flip? See, Zuko thought I was close too. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Bakugo rolled his eyes as he sat back up with a still jabbering Izuku, swinging off his neck. He definitely seems okay now. Wrapping an arm around the toddler, he stood up fully and came face to face with Aizawa. You both did well there, Aizawa said. Kirishima, for a second I thought you had him. Kirishima's open-mouthed smile went from ear to ear, and Bakugo rolled his eyes again. Aizawa turned to Bakugo. Take this. He handed him a tube full of cream. It needs to be applied to Midoriya's palms twice a day for the next couple of days, just to ensure the skin stays well moisturized while they heal. It's only superficial, surface-level damage, and won't cause any further issues. Now, I suggest you all head back and get cleaned up. They nodded and turned to head back to the dorms and the baths as Aizawa headed to the crate, presumably to put it back into storage, but Bakugo stopped. You take Izuku for a second. I just need to ask Aizawa something, he said to Kirishima, already handing Izuku over. What? All right, everything okay? Kirishima asked as Bakugo turned. Yeah, I've just got to check something. You carry on. Kacchan? Izuku squeaked, frowning. I'll catch up a little later, buddy, promise, he shouted as he began to jog after his teacher. He caught up with Aizawa at the crate. No, thank you. I don't feel up to sparring today, Aizawa muttered. Bakugo's train of thought derailed and sputtered out of sight. No, that wasn't... I know. I thought I told you to go and get cleaned up. Yes, you did, sir, but I need to talk to All Might, Bakugo explained. Kirishima hit you hard this time. I'm a racerhead. Aizawa fixed him with an impassive stare. Yeah, I know. What? Oh my god. Bakugo's brain finally clicked into gear. Sir, that's the third joke this morning. What the hell? Aizawa's mouth twitched. With the added stresses of parenting, I thought you may appreciate a little extra humor this weekend. Maybe I will, now that I know you haven't totally lost the plot. That's... Bakugo started. And because... Aizawa now grinned fully. No one would believe you if you told them. That is completely true. Not a soul. Oh my god. I'm going to be stuck with him telling me terrible dad jokes until Monday. Now, why do you want to speak to All Might? Bakugo took a deep breath. I was wondering if he'd be able to visit the dorms tomorrow afternoon, in full form for Midoriya, Aizawa finished for him. And? Bakugo had hoped he wouldn't have to explain everything in one go. He rubbed at his eyes and stared at the crate. He didn't have a lot of birthday parties growing up, Bakugo murmured. And I know it's not his birthday now, but we could just, I don't know, do something nice. Let him eat cake, take pictures for his mom, and... All Might is in the staff room until lunchtime. I'm sure he'll be happy to see you, Aizawa said very softly. I would also advise talking to your class rep about what can be arranged on such short notice. I'm sure Class 2A will be able to dig up banners and the like from somewhere. Now, off you go. Bakugo nodded, not daring to meet Aizawa's eyes, then spun on his heel and went in search of All Might. Thankfully, All Might was alone in the staff room when Bakugo arrived. He knocked the open door to announce himself. Young Bakugo, what are you doing here on a Saturday? Smiled All Might as he looked up. He beckoned Bakugo into the room. I could ask you the same thing, sir. Bakugo raised his eyebrows. All Might had difficulty with downtime, he knew, because he had overheard Izuku gently chiding his mentor on more than one occasion about the need to rest. All Might chuckled. Touché. Now, are you looking for someone in particular? Bakugo nodded. Actually, I was looking for you. The former number 1 smile was back. Well, what a lovely surprise. I've just made a pot of tea. Come and take a seat. He sat down and watched as All Might fetched an extra cup, poured the tea, and settled himself across from Bakugo. So, what can I do for you, my boy? Bakugo swallowed. Was this rude of him to ask? All Might had suffered terrible injuries, and his muscle form could cause him actual pain and discomfort. I'm about to ask him to do that for the sake of a 4-year-old who will no longer be 4 years old in less than 48 hours. He met All Might's bright blue gaze. I actually wanted to ask you something, sir. A favor, if that's... He stammered. Ask away. Bakugo decided to explain what he wanted to do for Izuku first. To give context. All Might watched as Bakugo became more and more animated, talking about throwing a party for young Midoriya, about banners and cake, maybe even party hats and lots of pictures. The energy Bakugo was giving out was infectious and delightful for the teacher to see from someone usually so closed off. It reminded him, forcefully, of Midoriya himself. He imagined he could work out what Bakugo was going to ask of him, and he would agree, of course, but it seemed that the young man was doing some thinking out loud, so he let him carry on uninterrupted. Aizawa had been keeping him up to date on Midoriya's situation, and had been impressed with Bakugo's handling of it so far. He knew that Midoriya did not recognize the nickname of Deku and had asked to be called by his first name. He had presumed that, while not in Midoriya's presence, Bakugo would revert to the nickname, but he hadn't yet. He wondered if anyone else had watched Bakugo's face as he said Midoriya's given name. He said it with such gentle care that All Might wondered whether Bakugo thought it was made of glass. And you know, Izuku didn't have many birthday parties growing up, so I thought we could do this, and it would make him so happy if you were able to be there, but he... Bakugo finally brought his attention back to All Might, and found he was watching him closely with a soft smile and knowing eyes. Bakugo swallowed the rest of his sentence. But he doesn't recognize me in this form, so you were wondering if I could put in a hero appearance for the occasion, finished All Might, still smiling. If you're happy to do so, sir, but I don't want... Bakugo started. I don't want you to hurt yourself. All Might held his hand up. My boy, happy does not begin to cover how much it would mean for me to do this for young Midoriya. I cannot, however, pretend it will be a lengthy appearance. It might not even be an hour. Bakugo was already shaking his head with a grin. Sir, Izuku still gets excited to spend lessons with you, and you've been his mentor for 2 years. 4-year-old Izuku would have sold his entire All Might collection, and mine, to meet you for 5 minutes, let alone 50. Anything you can manage will be enough, that much I know. All Might grinned back. In that case, young Bakugo, you have just booked yourself an official All Might hero appearance. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Bakugo nodded and stood up to leave. I've still got a shower. As he headed for the door, he turned to thank All Might again for the tea, but he was interrupted. It's good to see you so invested in something other than hero work, my boy, All Might said quietly, surveying him over the rim of his teacup. Bakugo got the feeling that All Might could see something in him that he didn't think he himself was ready to look at. Something that Kirishima had already prodded at. Something that the arrival of little Izuku had stuck a crowbar in and was 2/3 of the way through getting the lid clean off of. Thanks for the tea, he managed to choke out, then all but bolted from the room. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 7 of Weekend at Bakugo's. Chapter 8 will be up next. I hope you all are still enjoying this one. I just adore this fic so much, and as always, thank you so much for listening.